Welcome to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast, your source of strategies and insights to make you a better leader. Influence, improve, inspire.
Hi, this is Zoe Routh, and I am really excited to introduce you to super rocket star guru Renee Giarrusso, who is the founder and director of RG Dynamics, and she is a total dynamo herself. She's the author of Limitless Leadership, which is a handbook for leading from the inside out. So we have a lot of synergies in terms of our leadership philosophy, and I'm really excited to bring her to you. She has extensive corporate experience with senior leadership and sales roles, and she's been training and speaking with teams and leaders for over a decade on how to identify and map motivation for leverage in business, which I think is really cool. So hopefully we'll dive into that. So welcome, Renee.
Thank you, Zoe, for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your leadership journey. And I love how you started in corporate and you've morphed into now a leadership specialist. So tell us a little bit about the ups and downs of your leadership experience.
Yeah, so, I had at a fairly young age, I was a team leader in a business and had, as you mentioned, some leadership roles and, managing large teams and remote teams and diverse teams. I started studying coaching and really getting into it, and woke up one day and literally thought to myself, I'd love to be applying this, making a difference and growing people, not just because I'm their manager. And I really had this passion to work in lots of different industries with lots of different people at all levels. And that's what really, really drove me, and I haven't looked back.
Yeah, you mentioned that on your website that you've worked on so many different industry sectors. What do you find are the differences and the commonalities in the work that you do with these different industries?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, people are people, and there's a lot of commonalities around the challenges with leadership, whether you're in automotive, engineering, banking or food and beverage, they're similar. The key differences, I think, are what the culture allows them to do. So, some of the industries are, risk-taking cultures versus some that aren't. And also, some of the businesses are coach-centric cultures where others aren't. And I think that's where the key differences are, that I'm able to share, hands-on experience and seeing it, from my business point of view.
Can you rewind a little bit? Coach-centric what? What did you say with that there?
Cultures.
Oh, God, I thought you said coach-centric coccyx. I'm like, that's what?
What did you think, Zoe?
Coach-centric cultures. Right. I haven't come across many coach-centric cultures. What causes them to arise?
Yeah, I think I worked in one. I worked for one for 12 years. So from my first management role, managing two people, I was taught to formally coach. I was measured that I was coaching monthly and instilling that into my team. And then that cascades down as you move through the organisation. So really passionate about coaching, and it's the way they do things. And it's something I'm really passionate about with the companies I work in, and help assist them bring that in, not just from me coaching them, but actually training them around the modality of coaching.
Oh, wow. Fantastic. That's really cool to hear that live and in action as opposed to just a theory about how coaching can cascade through an organization.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about this piece of work that you do, how you identify and map motivation.
Yeah, so something I've done for a little while, and I just think there's so many people that do what they're good at, but not what they're good at that they enjoy. And I think as a leader, or anyone, whether it's your peers, yourself, or people that are reporting through to you, if you can understand what really lights them up. So we use lab profiling questions, we use different questioning techniques and tools, but it can be as simple as, running an activity where you talk about what you're good at and everyone comes up with that straight away, and then reflecting on what the difference is and what energy that gives you if it's something that means a lot to you, you know, that if you could do something for a week, what would that be? And if that's something not in a current role, how can we bring that in? Is that the right role, or how can we ramp that up?
Wow. Do you get a lot of folks who discover that what they're really passionate and excited about isn't what they're doing in their current job and find that they actually have to leave the workplace? Or do you find it's easy to make adjustments to their current role?
Overall, if I looked back over the last 10 years, we tend to be able to bring the preferences in that motivate them. There are the odd few that will, you know, we do that and they're still not where they need to be, which isn't always a bad thing. They look at a different career, they might stay in the same organisation, but it builds their strategic agility and thinking in looking at what is outside of their role, which I think is actually a bit of a gift. And it depends, it's awakened them and given them an awareness they may not have had before.
Okay. So it's possible to reinvent yourself and still stay where you are.
I think so. There has to be, you know, I have a bit of a belief around if you are doing what you're good at that you love at least 70% of the time, I think you can have that spring in your step. And there's, you know, I run my own practice and there's things in what I do that I don't love, but it's a small percentage, and I make sure I'm on top of that and really drive the things that light me up as much as possible.
I think that's a really sensible way to live life, really. Otherwise it becomes dull drudgery.
Yeah, exactly. And not just doing you know, what I say, being a human, you know, doing what a human being and moving through an organisation because that's the role you should do next. I think we become a bit on, you know, autopilot there. And it's really looking at, you know, what you're strong at and what your colleagues are strong at and leveraging what lights you up opposed to doing things that, you know, don't light you up, and leveraging what I call a strength-based team.
What do you mean by a strengths-based team?
So a strength-based team is knowing who is strong in what and being able to either partner up with that person or delegate to that person the things that they're strong at, the things that motivate them. Well,
that makes sense. That goes in alignment with knowing what you're passionate about and then what you're strong with.
Yeah.
Cool. So tell me a little bit about your philosophy of limitless leadership.
Yeah, so it's around, I guess, you know, leadership not having a final destination. I see it as infinite. I think as leaders, if we stop learning, we've put that ceiling there. And I think we need to learn, unlearn, evolve and create. And I have a real passion around the three-dimensional leadership, which is leading self before you lead others or influence and lead decisions. And that comes down to, you know, three things, which is, I think, deep commitment, effective communication, and deep connection. And that helps us move up what I call the limitless leadership ladder. So we go from, you know, managing ourselves, managing others, leading leaders, to being co-creative and leading industry. And being that expert, being that phone call. So it's not just about, you know, the people side, it's the industry side and, you know, whatever you're working in.
I love it. So our philosophies are very much aligned, and I believe in that evolution and learning principle as well. I'm curious what you mean by deep connection.
Yeah, deep connection with obviously yourself. You've got to know you first, and your team. I think, you know, I don't know if you agree, but a lot of leaders try and do it all and know it all and be that person. And I think you've got to be connected with your team so that you're one and you're all working together, you know, towards whatever you're working, you know, being on your team, but also being in it enough to understand people and being on that same journey opposed to sort of being an and.
Being an and, did you say?
An and, you know, them and you. It shouldn't be like that. And a lot of teams are. You know, they'll say to me, you know, this is our team and that's, well, they won't say our leader, they'll say that's our manager.
Oh, okay.
You go to other teams and they say us, and they're talking about their manager and the team as one.
Yeah. So that's something that a lot of new leaders in particular struggle with. How do you balance being part of the us as well as dealing with the authority problem. And they either go one of two ways. They put too much distance between them and the team, or they go the other direction and are too friendly and trying to be their friend. So how do you help them find the balance?
Yeah, and it is a very, going from being in a team to leading that team is a big thing I see, and we should do a lot of work around that. I think the key is communicating to the team what difference you can make that maybe wasn't made before. And I think it's also an identity thing. So you've got a new identity, and you need to let the team know what that is. So instead of, an email coming out, Mary's been promoted, she's your manager now, and Monday everything's normal, Mary needs to take that team, sit down with them, talk to them, what was working, what wasn't, what have we got to let in, let go, let be, what do you want from me as your manager, to show that distinction, and I think have that sort of that change in identity, that she's there to help them and, give them the things maybe they didn't get before. I think that's really important, and always have a thing, if somebody in your team, you have to have the chat with them, or there's performance issues, obviously it's not a nice thing to go through, but if it's really keeping you up at night, you're too close. I think you've got to have a bit of a barometer there.
Oh boy, I think a lot of people would, regardless of their friendliness factor, would find having the performance conversations challenging.
Yeah, look, they are, but I think if it's at the point where you're either tolerating it, which some people will say, I'll put up with it, and I'll say, well, if it was your business, would you? No, I wouldn't have. Were you too close? I think it's just having that, differentiating what it would be if it, was different.
Yeah, okay. I think that's a good distinction, and that's a difficult one to self-monitor as a new leader. Am I too close? Am I too friendly? Because it's, you kind of, I think as new leaders, you have this sense of grieving when when that sort of invisible barrier comes up between you and the rest of the team, which positional authority often brings. And this is what I experience with the people that I coach, is that they have this sense of grief and alienation. And I encourage them to find their new level of support, which is amongst their manager peers, which is often a new cohort that they're moving into. How do you suggest they get support?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in people either having a coach or mentor, and maybe not always in the business. And I think you're right, it's shifting where you spend your time as well. So, especially emerging leaders that are, got their first team, they'll say to me, we have these Friday night drinks and I'm still going to them. And I'm like, don't stop that, but maybe just go for an hour and then let your team be their team and go with your peers. And then that comes back to that whole, current identity versus your old identity. Because if nothing changes, the way they see you and the way you're interacting won't change.
I think that's sage advice. It's like, I'm still part of this group, and I also have another group that's part of my peer support. Really hard to do. Really hard to do.
It is a challenge, and I think it's an ongoing challenge. And clients that say, I haven't gone through that, I'm like, well, you will at some point, and I have, I've been in teams that I've been, managed and led, and I love people, and I really, looking back now, and I was mid-20s, I really found it, I look back now and I was too close. Yeah. So, I sort of call those experiences gifts. So I always think, what did I learn, what not to do next time, and what can I share, with others. Yeah. And that's part of being a limitless leader, I'm sure, which is that reflective practice, which I also advocate too. So when you're talking about, limitless gives this idea of that there's, you can go anywhere, anyhow. What do you think holds leaders back? Where are the things where do they get tripped up? Yeah, well, I think sometimes they don't understand and adapt to their team, and therefore segregate themselves and treat everybody the same. Whereas I think I've got a bit of a saying, people are colours, be a rainbow. you need to understand people, adapt to them, give them what they need. And I think sometimes that can hold a leader back from really deep connection and taking their team and business and organisation to the next level. I think leaders, get in their own way, at times, and that could be, I don't think I can do this, so why would the team be able to achieve that? So they need to lead themselves first and be, like you said, Zoe, reflective and really know what their limiting beliefs are and bust those down. I think that's really important. What's your practice for servicing limiting beliefs? For me, it's a reframe. I'm very goal oriented and very future focused. I don't get stuck in the now. I never have. I always flip things to does it really matter, and what can I do now that's going to change something down the track? To the point, last week I was with a client and we're working on their performance reviews, and I'm like, they should be previews, not reviews. 10% should be about what's happened, 90% I believe should be about what is going to happen. So that whole forward thinking piece has really served me personally and professionally. Yeah. That's an interesting concept. So previews instead of reviews. So with that, how do you encourage people to celebrate their successes and learn from their mistakes? Yeah, so you still do that, but you don't have that as the whole conversation. And I go more into whatever you're celebrating, what helped you to get to that you can ramp up or bring in more to move forward and maybe get that result even more quickly or at a more effectively or at a higher level. Okay, so it's like review for preview, review, lessons learned, let's apply, let's keep moving. Yeah, and I think, look, I'm a big believer in celebrating success and, learning from what I call, people. There's people in our lives that are gifts that we can learn from. There's situations. I'm about to write something on this. So the gift that keeps giving sometimes. Is that just a euphemism for pain in the ass? Yeah, it's a nice, we could turn it into an acronym. But I think it's, don't ever, and sometimes I think I can do the whole positive piece in overdrive and not always learn the lesson. And that's something I've learned over the years is, the lessons are the gold at the end of the day, but use them in an empowering way, not in a way that you're just thinking about, the bad thing that happened or that person or whatever. Yeah, because I think we can get stuck in those history narratives. I think that's also one of the things that holds people back is that they get stuck in their history. They do, and their story. And the more you think about it, the more you're in it. It's I just don't think to give really negative things too much life. I think that's a really sensible approach. I think it's important to digest and process negative experiences with people, but not to wallow in it, I suppose. And sometimes we have a tendency to do that. Yeah, and I think the more people talk about something negative at work, it becomes like, their story, they're thinking about it, others are talking about it. And it goes back to the whole basic, you get what you focus on. Yeah. Or I call it awfulizing. It's not a real word. But think about something enough, you're going to sort and find and perceive the world, and you'll see it or it'll happen. Usually I love that. Awfulizing, that's perfect. Now you're very good at deciphering people, and you that's a key principle for you in terms of leaders being limitless and being able to become rainbows to their people. What are your secrets to deciphering and understanding people as colors? Yeah, I think a big thing is to be curious and interested, and I am. I just love people. From a young age, I've been, all my friends were from different cultures, different ethnicities, and I think I love to learn from people, and I think being curious and being open, really, really important. Very perceptive around the whole, listening to what's not being said. So, seeing someone that says, I'm going to do that, I'll see that as compliant, whereas I can feel if they own it and they're really committed. So I think it's seeing past all the words. Obviously they count, but seeing more than that, listening deeply, being curious, and a big thing for me is building rapport. I think if you're not in rapport with somebody, you're always going to get shallow answers and responses. I think rapport equals influence, and you've got to delve deep and take that time, to build subliminal rapport and really connect. That whole connection piece is vital. Yeah.
So what are your tips on deep rapport?
Yeah, deep rapport for me is understanding the person, being in the moment, I think is really, really important. And even, whether I'm running a workshop or it's one-on-one coaching, letting people download. I think we get so caught up in go, go, go. It might not even always be advantageous to the session, but it gets people to feel profoundly listened to, which is rare, and I think that helps build rapport. I have a little saying, be a little bit more like John, so don't change who you are, but amplify up or down 20% to be a little bit more like the other person. So for me, going from all the industries I work across, from a workshop in a marketing team to, an auditing team in a bank to a group of graduate engineers, I'm quite high energy. So some of those, I have to tone down my energy a bit to match the audience. To the point, I've had years ago a banking group. They're like, you are not having any coffee, Renee. And I knew that was a sign. I said, oh, it's okay, I've already had 3. No, so I think it's amplifying up or down to be a little bit more like the other person. And even on emails, I do a lot on, building rapport through emails. So if I get heavy, detailed emails, which isn't my style, instead of just bullet points, I'll give a bit more than I normally will. And you can really decipher and decode people's motivation and the way they like to receive information through emails, as well as verbally, which I think is very powerful.
Wow. So tell me a little bit how you decode people's emails.
Yeah, so I look at the chunk level. So people like information in lots of different ways. So, some people love just the why are we doing this, 3 or 4 words, and that motivates me. A business partner I had a few years ago, high detail, would tell a story when they spoke or when they wrote an email. There'd be a beginning, a middle and an end. So it's about matching that. It's also the words. So I'm highly visual, so most of my emails will naturally be, it was great to see you. I look forward to catching up. Please see the link attached. A lot of visual language. So I tap into the different, what they're called convincer strategies, how people like to get information. And it goes back to a tool I use around seeing, doing, hearing or reading. We all like information in those 4 ways, but we have a preference. So once I really get to know people, I'll mould it to that. And until I get to know people, you put the 4 in, everything. So when I run presenting to win and programs around how to present, whether it's a proposal, an internal presentation, or, as running a workshop, you want to bring in the seeing, the hearing, the doing, the feeling, the data, and please a few people and then change the people, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. And it makes sense now because I often do this in terms of asking clients how they like to be contacted. Email, mobile, text.
Yes.
And I think that's a bit of a clue.
It's such a good question, though. And they have an answer. That's the thing. They always can usually come out with something.
Yeah. And that makes a big difference in terms of how they feel supported and heard, actually.
And heard. And I think it's what, conversations that cut through for me are the ones where you're matching their preference where you can. And I think, you get to a point you do it subconsciously, but it's something you should always be mindful of.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. That's a great little tip on how to respond to people's different email style. I love it.
Yes. Yeah. So I look back to the company, Zoe, that, my first big job, and there was a graphic, like a picture. It was in a newspaper back then, showing my age, and the character just had a little hand pointing up saying, "Do you want success?" and the company name. No job title, no detail. Guess who went for it? Me. And they did that on purpose. They were quite ahead of their time. They said, what appealed to you in that ad? And they were looking for a big picture person for that role.
Yeah.
If that ad had, you know, like 20 tiny little bullet points and, you know, half a page, I wouldn't have even looked at it.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's great.
Yeah. So you can bring this into, you know, how you're communicating with your team and attracting the right people for your team. So it's quite exciting. It's very powerful.
That's cool. Now, there's 2 secrets I want you to share with us. My first secret, I know, are you willing to share your secrets? The first one is you say you're very high energy, and I know that to be true because we know each other from Thought Leaders Business School, and I know you are just like a bundle of enthusiasm and energy. And so what's your secret formula, if you have one, for that kind of boundless energy?
Wow, okay. I think it comes back to my big word, which is limitless, which I've sort of lived by for a few years now. And it probably just sounds so simple. I really love what I do. I do. Just making a difference, meeting people, the diversity keeps me going, and I think diversity is part of the answer there. Having diversity, not knowing what's around the corner, as you know, in what we do. You know, it's different people, different programs, different responses. I also, I love my yoga. I do need to go a bit more, but my meditation, Zoe, is cooking.
Oh, cool.
So I'm not a TV watcher, so even if I walk in at 8 o'clock, I will cook a meal from scratch. And that to me is my zone out. Don't like recipes because there's process there. Just cook. And cooking for other people, for me, is an entertaining. I could do it every day. I love it. And I think it's about getting the balance. And, you know, when I travel for work, when I travel a bit, when I'm not cooking at night and I'm going out and buying food, I really miss it. It's the first thing I do when I get home.
Yeah, right.
So I think it's knowing what your meditation is. What is it for you that helps you, I guess, sort of reflect, recharge and refocus, which is my 3 little cups that I always check in on.
That's awesome. I like that. Cooking as meditation. I'm going to ponder that. I think that's a form of mindfulness that would bring a lot of joy from a daily activity like that. Plus, probably better for your digestion too, if you're putting that much love into your food.
Yeah. And look, I don't know if it's my, you know, I'm half Italian, if it's my heritage in there or what it is. But from a very young age, you know, going food shopping, going to the market on a Saturday and cooking, I just love it. Yeah, it's like my dream Saturday.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, so your last tip. What is your top tip for leaders if they could just improve one thing or could do one thing to improve their roles? What do you suggest?
So I think there's quite a few things, but I think probably the biggest thing is to find out what lights people up. The more you do that, the more you'll be seen as a coaching resource, because people will hopefully be driving and feeding whatever it is that lights them up. You know, I think as a leader, you're almost like a conductor of an orchestra. You know, you shouldn't be playing an instrument, you should be guiding. And I think if you know the potential every instrument or person has in that orchestra, you can bring them together and guide them and really take them to the next level. So I think taking the time and understanding people goes so far. The longevity of what that can give you as a leader is, well, it's limitless. And so many people say, I don't have the time for that chit-chat, and I don't, but it's the cost of not doing it. You need to do it. That's
beautiful. Renee, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. You are a gem, and I love your insights, and I just love hanging out with you.
Oh, thanks, Zoe. It's been a pleasure. I have to do it again. Thanks for having me.